August 29, 2005. As the sun began to rise over Louisiana, millions of Americans watched the weather with fear. A massive hurricane named Katrina was racing toward the Gulf Coast. People knew a dangerous storm was coming. What they didn't know was that Hurricane Katrina would become one of the deadliest and most expensive disasters in American history. And the storm itself wasn't the only reason, because what truly destroyed New Orleans wasn't just wind or rain. It was a failure that experts had warned about for years. For decades, engineers had repeatedly raised concerns about the city's flood protection system. Reports were written, studies were conducted, warnings were issued, but very little changed. And when Katrina arrived, those warnings became reality. To understand what happened, we first need to understand New Orleans. New Orleans is unlike most major cities in America. It sits between the Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain. Large parts of the city lie below sea level. In some areas, the ground is several feet lower than the surrounding water. Because of this, New Orleans depends on a vast network of levees, flood walls, pumps, and drainage canals. These structures protect the city from being overwhelmed by water. Without them, much of New Orleans would flood. For generations, people trusted this system, but there was one problem. Many experts believed it wasn't strong enough to survive a major hurricane. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, studies repeatedly showed that a powerful storm could cause catastrophic flooding. In 2004, FEMA sponsored a disaster simulation known as Hurricane Pam. The exercise imagined a large hurricane striking New Orleans directly. The results were terrifying. The simulation predicted widespread flooding, thousands of deaths, and a humanitarian disaster unlike anything America had experienced in modern times. Yet despite the warnings, major improvements were not completed before Katrina arrived. Then, in August 2005, a tropical disturbance formed near the Bahamas. At first, it didn't appear extraordinary, but over the following days, it grew stronger. After crossing Florida, Katrina entered the Gulf of Mexico. There, it encountered extremely warm water. Warm ocean water acts like fuel for hurricanes, and Katrina consumed that fuel rapidly. The storm exploded in strength. Within days, Katrina became a Category 5 hurricane. Its winds reached nearly 175 miles per hour. Meteorologists watched in disbelief as the storm grew into a monster. The forecasts became increasingly alarming. Government officials urged residents to leave. On August 28th, New Orleans issued the first mandatory evacuation order in its history. Hundreds of thousands of people evacuated. Highways became packed with traffic. Gas stations ran out of fuel. Hotels filled up, but not everyone could leave. Many residents lacked transportation. Others were elderly, sick, or unable to travel. Thousands remained behind. As Katrina approached the coast, weather experts issued some of the strongest warnings ever written. They warned of devastating storm surge. They warned that parts of the city could become uninhabitable. They warned of incredible human suffering. And then Katrina arrived. Early on August 29, 2005, the hurricane made landfall in Louisiana. Although it had weakened from Category 5 status, it remained an extremely powerful Category 3 storm. The winds were destructive, but the greatest danger wasn't the wind. It was the water. A massive storm surge pushed enormous amounts of seawater toward the coast. As water levels rose, pressure on the levee system increased. Then the system began to fail. Flood walls cracked. Levees were overtopped. Breaches opened in multiple locations. Water rushed into neighborhoods at incredible speed. Entire streets disappeared beneath floodwater. Families who believed they were safe suddenly found water pouring into their homes. Many residents climbed into attics. Others escaped onto rooftops. Some used axes to break through ceilings as floodwaters continued rising. Throughout the city, people desperately searched for safety. The flooding spread rapidly. Within days, nearly 80% of New Orleans was underwater. Some neighborhoods were submerged beneath more than 10 feet of water. Entire communities vanished beneath the flood. The famous French Quarter escaped the worst damage because it sits on higher ground. But many residential areas were devastated. The lower Ninth Ward became one of the hardest hit locations. Homes were swept from foundations. Blocks were destroyed. The disaster quickly became a humanitarian crisis. Thousands of stranded residents gathered at the Louisiana Superdome and Convention Center. Conditions deteriorated rapidly. Food became scarce. Water supplies ran low. Sanitation systems failed. Temperatures soared. People waited for rescue, while news cameras broadcast the crisis across the world. Many Americans were shocked by what they saw. Questions quickly emerged. Why had help taken so long to arrive? Why had the city been so vulnerable? Why had earlier warnings not been addressed? Rescue operations continued for days. Helicopters lifted survivors from rooftops. Boats moved through flooded streets. Emergency crews searched house after house. For many families, help arrived just in time. For others, it did not. When the water finally receded, the scale of destruction became clear. Hurricane Katrina wasn't just a story about extreme weather. It was a story about infrastructure, preparedness, leadership, and human resilience. And more than 20 years later, it remains one of the most important lessons in modern American history.